never learn. The memory smolder and the soul always yearns after the fire. The fire still burns.
Anyway, they started thinking about what could be a feature, what could they add to the summer studio up here. They had the summer studio at that point, and the gas kiln, electric kilns, and so on. And they started developing a master plan for the, for the Adamah Studios. And they said, what would be better than, a large wood-burning kiln that then was more a group-oriented sort of a feature. And originally it was possibly to be on that hillside back there and be a bit more modest in size than what it is. And as they started talking about it, and then Don and I started talking and planning things out, I decided that probably the best way to go would be to create a two-chambered kiln that offered Bethel flexibility. So the bottom line is this whole wood-fire kiln system, the two chambers, two connected chambers can be fired together. And to Bob's kind of point or question, Bob, we haven't really tested the limit as to how quickly this kiln can be fired, the whole chamber, but I'm sure in a 3-4 day period it probably could be if it were set up properly. But anyway, obviously the two chambers, there's a lot of space there. It's going to require a tremendous amount of work to be placed in the kiln, and then a certain commitment in terms of days for sure to fire it off. So that is what we're going to do at the end of July here with the Wisconsin Woodfire 2012. But the second chamber has its own firebox, and we'll detail that a little bit. But that holds quite a bit of work and can be fired by itself with the firebox that it has available to itself. And that can be fired anywhere between 24, I think this is one I think I have a better sense for. I think probably 24 hours is about as fast as you could probably fire it, but still, that's reasonable. They can do it as a weekend workshop, fire the kiln off in 24 hours, let it cool for 24 hours, and you've got that flexibility to do something on a smaller scale, with a smaller group, not as much work, all of that. So that made a lot of sense to Don. And then one kind of just little side note, Don was going to build the shed, right? And Don's a big thinker, was a big thinker, and a big doer for sure. And he was asking, so what size should this kiln shed be? I said, well, we need to get the stack out of the roof. So I put it at about, the peak of the roof should be about 13 feet or so, 13, 14 feet. So he went ahead and he was taking care of getting the kiln shed built. And when I came out here for the first time, actually the floor level was down here. And I walked in here and going, oh, we've got a gymnasium here. Don, is that, it's more like 16, 18 feet up there, right? So I had to kind of rethink scale. I hadn't drawn out any specific plans for the kiln, but I wanted the kiln to fit the shed. So that's literally how we started. I started with the chimney back there, and I came forward. And I felt like this was, a reasonable amount of group workspace here in the front. So the whole project sort of expanded a bit. Unfortunately, we had the resources to get the necessary number of bricks and all of that. But it definitely went from a 12, 15-foot, single-chambered Adamah on the hillside with a modest kind of shed to this. But people are pleased with it. And Don, being a very tall person, really wanted to make sure that the kiln was a little taller than my home. Is 20 feet long, but it's only 4 feet high. So you're doing knee pads all the time, and you're down here like this. This one you still have to do some knee pad work, but it's a little more comfortable to load. You don't have to be always on your hands and knees. So that's part of the height here, the height sensibility. 12 feet long, as I mentioned. Basically what happens is you load the work from the front to back. Where these side stoke holes are, you figure out which holes you're going to stoke, and then you have to leave an appropriate amount of space for wood to come down in and develop ember piles. But you know that the work that you stack around the side stoke holes will be in contact with wood and ember. So you select pieces that you want to have some sort of ember effect, down low on the piece at least, and you don't put, mixing bowls and that type of thing next to a side stove hole, obviously. So you're making those decisions, but you're all, aesthetic and functional decisions, as we said before. The work comes up to whatever configuration you have up to the front. I've had pieces right here inside the door, and we've also had basically a half circle opening here with no work. So it just depends on what kind of work you have and what you're trying to achieve. Once you fill the kiln, then these are the door bricks. So you place these bricks in here, you don't mortar them, and you leave a hole about this big, 12 by 12 or so, here, and one here. Well, this one gets bricked up momentarily, for the first part of the firing, and then ultimately this door hangs in front of it. But you then construct a little pad here and light a fire, a little campfire. It burns for 20 minutes to 40 minutes, whatever the conditions might be, and you nudge that up to the hole, and then it starts to draw naturally. It starts to actually pull and draw into the kiln, so your firing has begun. And it's just this little, for the first 12 hours, it's just this little flame coming inside your 9-inch door, and that's a good little burner. You'd be amazed over 12 hours how much drying and heating that does. But you just continue to build the fire up appropriately to, again, what's immediately inside. Sometimes you can move that faster, sometimes slower, but you just continue to throw more and more flame in there. And early on, you don't push anything in there. Then there comes a point where it just flatlines. It won't get any hotter. With maxing out as much flame as you can get out of that hole, it flatlines until you actually start pushing a few pieces into the kiln. So there is space in there. You start pushing a few pieces in, stoking in front of that. That pushes you up to the next level of temperature. And then there comes a point where that flatlines, and then you have to start top stoking. So a lot of times we'll keep this going for a while, and then pull the bricks out, lower the door, and then start putting wood in the top hole. So that then will continue to heat, and there are actually holes that are sealed off right now. There's a stoke hole here and a stoke hole here that ultimately is that's how you get high temperature. You're stoking in here, you're stoking in here, and you're stoking in here. And that gives you temperature basically in the first third of the kiln. So you might get kilns 9, 10, 11, 12, but just in the first third of the kiln, it's amazing how quickly the heat drops off. You think, wow, it's really hot in the front there. Well, 5 feet back, it's not nearly as hot. So then you end up having to start your side stoking process. So what we've developed over the years is just maintaining your front, keep stoking your front, start the side stoke sequence. So we start with number 1 typically, start stoking that. Or if you have it set up for number 2, that's your first hole. And just keep a rhythm going. And as you place wood in the side stoke holes, ember builds up, flames being pushed to the back of the kiln heats and progresses. So there comes a point where ideally you have some range of cone 8, 9, up to 12, 13, yeah.
When you're stoking, does one person do it, or do you have a whole crew?
But on the front, one person handles it, yeah. And then a lot of times when we're side stoking, one person can handle the whole thing. In fact, there's kind of nice timing. Just for example, someone can stoke here, and you have to give it the wood time to burn. There's this timing interval. So let's say we stoke here, let it burn, settles down. Stoke here and here, let it burn, settles down. Then you walk up, you stoke one of your side stoke holes, flame, smoke, come back around in the time that you get around to the other side. Yeah, it's a pretty good timing. Let's stoke the other side, and then you come back to the front. But what is ideal in a 6-7 day firing is to have someone handling the front, and then they just say, okay, hit number 2, and you have one person on this side, one person on that side. So that's ideal, especially after we pace ourselves, we get rest. No one's out here for 24, 36 hours, but it gets to be, it's physical, it's a challenge. So it's always nice to have, especially for the experienced folks that are trying to maintain temperature in a finessey way in the front, to have some willing side stokers. that they can just call on. So
Oh, it's a party, huh?
well, it can be, yeah, it can be a controlled party. Yeah.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
I can go backward. You're putting a fire in the front here. You have 2 holes that you've left in your brick wall. Where is it, on the ground down here?
Yeah.
I
Actually,
mean,
no,
you've got
I
this
build,
drop off.
yeah, we
Oh, you
we
built out a
build-
brick platform part.
Exactly,
Okay.
right.
And why do you have these sealed up? And you're saying you're gonna stoke here and here, but
Right. The Ken Bichelle fired this kiln last time. He came up with it. This is from Taiwan, I think. Essentially, this is grass and clay. It's a wonderful stucco.
Yeah.
It's insulated. It's
Yeah.
sealing. He really. We have different sensibilities
Right.
for firing a kiln. When I shut up the kiln, I don't seal it off completely. I let air kind of draw in naturally.
Right.
And
Okay.
for the kind of surface and reduction quality,
he wanted to make them sealed off.
he seals
for
it
his
completely, so
purposes
as
and-
little air is drawn into the kiln as possible.
Okay, one other question.
Yeah.
When I'm putting the wood and I see it's all cut long so you can slide it through, is it falling on the pot? I mean, where is it going?
Yeah, you're careful. Let's say you have a sculpture here. You always drop the wood into the hole so it's propped, and then the ember falls down. And it finally does creep and build up to a level like this, to where things get buried and swallowed
Okay.
by the ember.
So
But
it's
the wood-
lit up in there. When you look
Yeah.
through the
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you
hole,
can
you
see.
see what's going on and what you're
And
doing.
you're wearing protective glasses for sure, especially at high temperature.
Okay.
Not only the drying, like even early on drying of your eyes, but you need to have really good glasses because
Okay.
it's bright. Yeah, they're interesting, because most of you know spy holes, even down to like little spy holes. With an electric kiln, you can't see a whole lot other than one cone sitting in front of it. This is a window of opportunity.
Okay.
We don't just hold it open for durations, but you pull that out and you can see a lot. You can see everything that's going on.
And I see you've got those holes for the heat to go through. What are
Right,
that other room
that's
back
the
there?
flue, yeah.
Okay.
So what we've done here is we've gotten temperature in the Adamah and the second chamber, so we might as well kind of deal with that.
David, could I ask you a quick question? Because you mentioned temperature. Is that such an important way to evaluate how the kiln is firing? How are you measuring the temperature?
We have cones, which many of you know what a cone is, cone packs.
I've heard, I've never
They're-
seen one.
They're little ceramic temperature prongs that melt at very specific temperatures. And you put them, should be a pack around, but you put them, place them on the shelves in coils of clay, and they literally fall down with gravity once
So
you
you
put
know
that
when it's
temperature.
hit, Bob was teaching me a little bit.
Yeah,
A
when-
certain melting point, you're at cone 6, for
Exactly,
example.
right, that's a
Is
temperature.
it 6
yeah.
or?
There you go.
Oh, I was like,
Yeah.
geez.
That's good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they fall
Okay.
down. So like cone 6, I do know that temperature is 2230.
Okay.
So you know it's reached that temperature. We also have a pyrometer. These, as we get up, you'll see the thermocouples and so on. These plug into a pyrometer, which digitally reads out your temperature, which helps. It's all relative. We never, I've never
By
known,
one.
I've never known one to be accurate, but they are in terms of relative. You can know when the kiln is heating and when it's dropping down. So that helps you with the timing of your stoking pattern. So for experienced people, it's really helpful to dial in, but also for inexperienced, it's good proof. Well, I've been here for 3 hours and it's still 350 degrees. Well, you have to handle it this way and it will bump up, So it's helpful for experienced and inexperienced folks. But we have one thermocouple in the front, one in the back to
Okay, I do
kind
have
of
one more question. What about the
monitor.
big stones? Necessary? Or just cool looking?
Both. This is buttressing, so any arch, strong arch, it pushes out.
So that your formation of the bricks holds?
Yes, right. So with any sort of sprung arch, it pushes out. When we'll talk about a catenary back here, which is different, it's self-supporting. This is a pretty tall, and the reason I say both is this is a pretty tall sprung arch. So it's pretty supportive in and of itself, but it's important with all this expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction, that you keep it supported. And fortunately, Dave Mellon, who's an excavator, owns a quarry, and he gave the material and the time in placing them to us free, which is part of the cool factor. Because it is really a nice platform to step up onto. you know, while you're stoking, the side stokes, and nice, this is a perfect place to sit and watch the pyrometer, and the little pad here, you know.
Do they have a role in thermal mass as well, or not? Do they?
It's insulative,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, yeah. Okay, so just to finish up really back here, once this kiln hits temperature, not too cold, it's still all these.
Oh, good. Oh, surprise for him.
Now, once this kiln is up to temperature, let's say you have cone 9 in the back, this kiln is about 2,000 degrees. It's preheated to 2,000. And so this is bricked up, the door's bricked up, and this is where you start putting wood in. There's a hole here, so you put wood in here. And we found that we'll start doing this, we'll actually start pushing this chamber ahead while still maintaining temperature in the front kiln. It's just a choice that we make. It could be easy to just fire off the first kiln and then shut it down and then just start firing here. We ultimately do that. When we first start stoking in here, this kiln is still being fired. There comes a point where we're satisfied with what's going on in this kiln that we do shut it off and no longer stoke that chamber. And then we just continue to stoke wood in here and here. So there's an internal firebox too. And then we just, through this chamber, there's really no need to soak. We pretty much get our cones down and call it good. And again, I'm sharing with you what my process is, and it can be handled all kinds of other ways. So then, with taking this out of the equation, this has been fired many more times than the whole system. I don't know how many times, probably 8, 10 times now, at least on this kiln, and the other kiln is, or the whole system is, I think, maybe been fired 5 or 6. And the way this is fired is you load it up, you break it up, and you start the fire here, and the flame kind of licks into the kiln. And there comes a point where you determine it's safe to start stoking in here as well, so you just go back and forth between the two fireboxes, and this fires really well. I was really pleased. This was kind of the biggest question mark and challenge for me as the designer, and again, using some math but a lot of intuition. That I wanted to make sure this firebox was big enough for this chamber, and I was pleased the first time we fired it without a problem.
Yeah.
We scored, yeah, I was pretty excited about that. That was a big relief. This is a catenary, back to the kind of the arch question. This is a parabola shape, so literally if you took a string or a chain and hung it upside down, it would strike a natural curve that's called a parabola. And it is a classic kiln arch design that's self-supporting. The reason its advantage is you don't have to have lots of mass holding it up. The only disadvantage, I think, for some people is that you have this curve that is always coming in, and as you're loading the kiln, you're not only losing some space, but you're having to accommodate the load to that curve, which isn't a problem, but that's sometimes a reason why some opt for a straight-walled sprung arch system versus a catenary.
How can you load higher? How are your shelves working in there?
Yeah, what happens is they go up pretty straight here, 4 and 9 inches apart, and so on, to a point where the curve really starts to impinge.
So you're stacking shelf,
Right.
stack, like
Yeah, like
bricks.
shelf, up to here, and
Got it.
then you have to, let's say we have 3 across, initially up to about here, and then there's 2 across, and then you start putting pieces that fit in that slot, and then at about the point you get up here, you're only 1 shelf wide, you know? So it's a puzzle, for sure.
And let me reiterate, you would not have added a coating of thatch clay
Yeah.
if it had been your preference, and why?
Oh, no, this castable layer is about 5 inches thick, that's critical insulation.
Okay.
Yeah, so the fire brick, and then this is about 5 inches of homemade castable. Off easily, but I really like, it seals this wall surface really nicely. And that comes right off.
Okay, here's a dumb question.
Right.
To get the draft, how do you connect with the chimney? Where is that?
Yeah, these holes here, go all the way through to the base of the chimney and up and out.
What hole?
These little holes here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that goes all the way back.
Okay, and how about the other one?
Those holes all connect through here.
Oh, and then it all goes
Yeah.
through there. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And then this is called a bag wall. There's a, take a look in here. This is a wall that when you're stoking wood in here, it keeps the flame from just shooting across the
Okay.
floor. It kind of pushes the heat and the flame up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, would you explain why the surface of the bricks in here looks different than the surface of the bricks in the other kiln on Adamah?
Yeah, this one has been salted. This chamber has been salted quite a bit. Soda ash, I think, and rock salt. So, and it's been fired so many more times.
Some of us might not know specifically what salt firing
Yeah,
is,
so the
but
shininess, this has a real sheen to it, and many people have fired with the wood, so you get the smoke and the reduction from the wood. You get the ash, a little bit of fine ash that impinges on pieces, which adds a warmth to the work. And then towards the end especially, they will salt. They'll throw soda ash or rock salt in. And what I'll speak towards rock salt, not soda ash. Rock salt is sodium chloride, and the sodium and the chloride dissociate. The sodium reacts with the clay, producing a glass surface, and or the glaze makes it even glassier. And the chloride goes off as hydrochloric acid into the atmosphere.
So you throw this in by hand?
Right. Well, yeah, they typically put on, take, an easy way is to sprinkle some on a piece of wood and actually wet it slightly, and then stoke that. And the moisture helps to volatilize the
So you
salt.
don't put the salt directly on the piece?
No, right, exactly,
right.
right. And some will put it in a, like, take newspaper and roll up
Okay.
a wad, a roll of salt, and then wet that, put it on a piece of angle iron, put the angle iron in and just dump it. And that's another way to introduce salt.
And it's gonna salt everything in there?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And that's, again, to Jeff's, just the shininess of the surface is the interaction with the salt and the brick. The brick is actually taking on that salt glaze.
Oh, good.
And just as far as the history of salt glazing and so on, the Germans developed it as a way of a process of glazing pieces, functional pottery, and it really perfected it. The French have a tradition of using salt as a glazing agent. So that's really kind of the early European sort of history of that. And then contemporary potters, especially since Don Wrights actually was one of the contemporary artists in the 70s who brought this whole folk tradition of salt glazing into a contemporary realm and really pushed the envelope there. In fact, he would often over-salt his work and get all these bleeding kind of rivulets of salt glaze mixed with slips and other glazes, and he sort of was at the forefront of that kind of in the
Does it change
60s.
the color at all?
Oh, it can do a lot of, change the character of a lot of things. That's a hard question to answer there. Yeah, it does have an effect, and it's one that produces more glass. It's typically produces more shiny surface, whereas just the straight wood ash or Adamah surfaces can be a range of shiny to very matte, sort of dry surfaces, depending on temperature and clays and all of that. But most people that are working with salt glazing want a shinier, smoother, glassier effect. And that's what they're after.
Would there already be glaze on the piece?
Yeah,
And then
oftentimes.
this affects,
But traditionally, no. It was
Oh,
what
yeah.
they would do is they would take crocks or some functional pottery, possibly glaze the interior,
Okay.
but not the exterior, and then fire it and then salt glaze it, and that produced a natural glass surface that could be cleaned. That's my sense would be
Wipeable.
the original reason to salt, but then it became more of an aesthetic as well.
hey, can you put dishes, these handmade dishes in the dishwasher?
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, you bet. Yeah. Stoneware is really a strong. That's part of the character of stoneware and porcelain is its strength. It's vitreous material, so it's very strong typically. Open flame ware, that's another story. Putting things directly on the, an open flame can be done, but it would require other clay chemistry to handle that sort of thermal shock. But yeah, typically microwaves and dishwashers are pretty safe for this kind of wear. Yeah.
When is the Wisconsin Woodfire Workshop that you lead, and what is the itinerary for the workshop?
This year it's starting on Friday. The way we have been handling these summer workshops is the workshop itself is just a 3-day, 2.5 day, if you will, process. So Friday evening, do a meet and greet at 7 o'clock, and this would be this year, July 27th. Then Saturday and Sunday, I present, and people bring ware. I'll bring as much work as they possibly can. And the Saturday and Sunday, I present. We all glaze and begin loading the kilns. So Saturday and Sunday is involved with presentations, glazing, loading both of these chambers, and by Sunday late afternoon, we're ready to start the firing. And we light the fire on Sunday later in the day, and most people. Then we set up shifts for the week, because once we start the firing on Sunday, it's going to get fired through the following Saturday. And so I have a sign-up sheet for shifts for every 4 hours or so, for 24 hours a day for 6 days, and people plug themselves in for what suits their schedule. Most people go home. Mia, she goes to the hotel, the Don Quixote or something. She's great. And but a lot of people commute back. They'll leave for a couple days or come back when their schedule allows to plug into the shift and help. Once I see the shift kind of forming, then I know where I need to be. And there's always someone overseeing the firing who has expertise.
That's a really important part of the experience, to take a stoke session.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and all the clay that we're working with, the pieces that we're making, would find a perfect home in here. Yeah,
it's all a stoneware type process.
It looks like you don't use mortar. It looks like they're just kind of loose bricks. Is that true for the most part?
It unlike it's true. It just unlike standard masonry where you have half-inch or so mortar layer of cement. We do, when we build these kilns, we take fire clay in a slurry and just apply a really thin slurry, just so that the bricks kind of suck together. There is a little bit of fire clay. You can't see it, but each of these bricks have a little bit of fire clay, and they were laid up. And that helps. Good observation.
Sort of Roman architecture style with no mortar, just making them stick together.
Yeah, it's amazing how strong an arch is, and especially not only in holding its structure, as you say, but it has to expand and then contract. With the kiln, heating and cooling, that's a big one too. That movement is significant. And in fact, you'll see these cracks. A lot of people mention, is the cracking a problem? Well, no, the kilns really have to crack, and it's ideal when they crack kind of like a tortoise shell, as you can see. There's a little bit of a tortoise shell kind of look to it. That means it's cracked evenly. If you have one big crack somewhere, that means you have a weak spot, probably. But yeah, this whole thing heaves. And you'll see things separate. I don't think this one separates as much, but sometimes this material will lift and you'll see a little gap at high fire, and then it'll settle back down. That sometimes can be a visual that people are pretty amazed at.
What's the purpose of the gravel?
Oh,
Is that just accidentally?
no, this was, I think, well, it's number one, fill. It's a fill, because there was a big gap here. There's other material there to fill. But it also is sort of, it's a cooler surface, If this were just a smooth surface, it might just be a little hotter. You can see it gets pretty hot. I think people who fired this last time must have put these up here, but you can see this indicates to you that this still gets pretty darn hot. That they put the wood up here, which looks like a good idea, because that's a really insulative. I'm sure that's why they did it. I mean, this is kind of like, you can do this, it's not going to just absolutely burn you, but that heat really does penetrate. And that is 4.5 inches, another 5 inches. So that's basically, there's 10 inches of material here, and this still gets, and this is very insulative, this mud layer, but still the heat really penetrates. I'm gonna switch this up. Oh, this would be kind of, since we're here, it's right. We were using these kiln shelves, but they're a little problematic in that they, number one, they crack, and also dust can fall down. So when I rebuilt my kiln at home, I had the same setup, and it made sense to just set up, these are soft brick, so they're very insulative and they're light, so they don't absorb heat. And just taking something like this is how we're going to handle the side stoke holes for our next firing. It's kind of nice. You can also do this and have one more up here, so you can just take a peek in a smaller hole if you just need to observe. You could set it up like this when it's actually being stoked. So all you have to do is set this aside. You have your wood sitting here, and just slide it in and set this back. So that'll be, I think, slick. You take that whole sliding of the kiln shelves out of the equation. Yeah.
Do you just put wood in the holes and then it catches fire from the heat?
Yes. Yeah. When you start dropping wood in there, it's orange in there. Yeah. The wood immediately combusts. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Think how hot it gets in here.
You know, this is a very comfortable space. Interestingly enough, the way the kiln shelf is set up, this, as you're experiencing, especially today, the breeze is, typically it's breezy out here. There's a lot of air movement, so it's a very, very amazingly comfortable space considering firing in the summer. I mean, I kind of have never considered firing my kiln at home for that reason. There's humidity, bugs, you know, heat, whatever. But we fired this kiln every summer, and it's just been really a comfortable circumstance. Hopefully it won't be 104, but speaking of that, Don writes this one quick story on him. When I started, he had built a kiln down at his place in Arizona. And it's Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Arizona, so it's 3,500 feet, high desert country. And he had an itinerary in some museum shows that he had to produce work for. And yeah, it's August. Went down there August 9th or something, you know, to do this firing. And I've just got the butterflies going. I can't imagine how we're going to do this. And it was 111. It was 111. And the whole dry heat thing, yeah, okay. But it was hot. And two things that were really, really kind of, after all the firing that I've done in all the different places, two things happened that were kind of, one, not that big a deal, but it was kind of funny to be realizing at 111, the bricks of the door, before we even lit the firing, they were already 100 plus degrees heat. You know, here in Wisconsin, firing in a cool spring, it took us, 2 days to get to the point where you feel that kind of temperature on the wall. Okay, so that was one thing. The other thing that was really much more interesting and remarkable is the front of his kiln is facing directly west. Bob, you're the sun, and one, we're firing at high temperature, and the sun was coming right down to the point where it was shining into the hole. So inside these kilns, it is bright as the sun when you're at high temperature. It is brilliant yellow, white heat inside, right? So you're wearing protective glasses. The sunshine coming directly into that 12-inch hole penetrated, and you could see the reflection, almost like a shadow of a pot against something. I mean, the sun had this power that was penetrating this thermal heat that was basically like the sun. I just never witnessed that, and it was interesting to just the way that set up perfectly, to the west, and also that we could recognize that you can actually see the reflection of the sun going into this hot kiln. It was really neat. Anything else? Appreciate all the interest and questions.